Hello and welcome to Uprisings. My name is Muriel Krabs and I am here with Father Joseph Gotwald, and he's agreed to come and talk to us this evening about his immersion studies in Mexico. And I'm just so grateful for you to come and talk to us. I have started this show for the purpose of reminding people of their humanity, getting us to focus on being good to each other, taking good care of ourselves, and taking care of our families. And I think that also extends to taking care of and understanding the needs of our fellow man.
Correct.
So,
it's my joy to be here.
Oh, I can't tell you how happy I am.
My joy.
Now, Father, to introduce you, you are the pastor of St. Joseph's Catholic Church.
Right.
In Hanover, right?
Correct.
How long have you been there?
Well, that's as pastor 11 years. But of course, that's a tricky question for me because, our Catholic tradition is rare, unheard of, that you ever come back to your home parish. But I lived on Baltimore Street. I was baptized at St. Joseph's and confirmed and grew up on Baltimore Street for 22 years. And so I've really been in Hanover. My parents lived in my brothers and sisters, so I'm really a native. So I've been in Hanover all my life almost, in a sense, although I was away with seminary training almost 40 years, not living in Hanover full time, but so I'm back now 11 years.
What block of Baltimore Street did you live on?
417.
So you were really close. Did they have the pretzel company there?
Oh, yes.
Very close?
Yes.
I lived in the 400 block of Franklin Street.
Oh, yes, I know that.
Okay, and when we first moved there, a very lovely lady came out to me, and she was healthy, ate well apparently, and she reminded me, she said, "Oh, you're so lucky because the soft pretzels come out at 4 o'clock every day." And I made a mental note right then that I was not going to be knocking on the door at 4 o'clock because they're delicious, aren't they?
Oh,
soft
absolutely.
Pretzels in Hanover.
No doubt about it.
And Ravona pretzel, by the way, is Hanover spelled backwards.
We know that, yes. I know that, yes.
So you ate some of those pretzels,
absolutely.
I presume. Well, I spoke with you a couple of weeks ago, I think, and you had just gotten back from Mexico. Can you tell us what had caused you to go to Mexico in the first place?
Well, in the first place, as being pastor, I really feel I'm responsible for all people, not just Catholics, but all people in the community. I'm responsible for them in a certain way, for their care and spiritual ministry. And I started noticing that there were a lot of Hispanic-looking kinds of people in the area, which seemed to be kind of ignored and no one talked about and so on and so forth. But I noticed there were a number, and I concluded that probably many of them, if not most of them, are probably Catholics, and no one seems to be ministering to them. At least that was my judgment. And so I thought, I need to start a ministry, not just for Catholic Mass or worship service, but really to minister to them because they have so many needs, as I was discovering as I began to read. So I decided that it's important for me, certainly to speak the language, but more important to understand. And even more than speaking the language was to understand our culture. So I decided in 2004, it's 5 years ago now, that I went to Mexico, not to study a language, but for an enculturation experience. And more than studies, it really is an experience. I went to Cuernavaca, which is south of Mexico City. Perhaps if you don't know this, Mexico City is the largest city in the world.
I didn't know that.
There are 29 million people in Mexico City.
So that's well larger than New York City.
New York or Tokyo, which I think at one time was maybe the largest.
Wow.
But anyway, I flew there to Mexico City, went to Cuernavaca, where they had this program in enculturation. I'd never been to Mexico. I'd never been to Acapulco or Cancun and so on and so forth. And I knew that by that time that I needed to go to where most of the people were, where they were from. And they were not from the coastal regions or the cities where tourists go. They were from the rural areas. So I went to Cuernavaca, and this program that they had through enculturation and get to understand how the people live. So it we did have speakers come in and speak to us, but also we had a lot of, if you will, field trips or excursions into the homes, into the neighborhoods, into the colonias, as they're called in Mexico, the colonias, to experience how the people live and to try to get to know the people. That was in 2004. Then I went back. I took a group of people from the parish because I felt as many people can experience who these people are would be very, very helpful in my ministry. By that time, we'd started the ministry. And then I went back to, again, for a third time, what you call a deeper experience. This time, this only happens once a year with this program. The other program has 12. Once a month, they have a 10-day experience to get to know the people, especially in the urban areas. This was a deeper experience that you had to experience the first one because the poverty was so much greater in the mountains, in the rural parts of southern Mexico, in the states, particularly Morelos, Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Chiapas.
Well, let me just interrupt you first of all. I think you said the poverty is worse in the southern part of Mexico.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Now, most of us, and maybe I'm just speaking out of turn, but Mexico looks like about maybe the size of Texas on the map of the world. Is Mexico?
It's a very, very large country.
It's a larger country than. I mean, I think people think of...
Well, it's not large in the United States, but it's a very large country. I don't think people realize how large the country is.
And I think you were saying that the coastal regions are where the tourist areas are and don't really represent Mexico at all. And then Mexico City is just huge. Yeah. And then the rest of it, is it sort of mountainous or jungle or...
Well, I've never been to a jungle. I'm not aware of any jungles, but it's very, very mountainous. And that's where I was this past, back in March I was there. I took people we went to help actually build something, to build a house. But it's very, very mountainous, very rural, very mountainous. They did not have any roads until 1970, for example.
Holy mackerel.
Oh, there are lots of small villages in the mountains, very difficult to get to. And so the people have really, there's no factories or industry. They try to eke their existence, their survival from the land and agriculture, basically, and trying to survive. And that becomes a very complicated thing. As I told you earlier, I brought a book called, which I think really says it all, Migrate or Die. And I think it's important for people to understand they are coming here, as we talked earlier, in a great spirit of hope that they can survive and that they can send money back to their families. It's very devastating for many of the people to leave their families and come to the United States, but they have no hope of surviving or existing especially in the mountains and the rural areas. 80% of Mexico lives close to poverty, of which 40% lived in misery, like $1 or $2 a day.
Yeah, okay, because the United States, of course, we're the only country in the world where the poor people are fat. I mean, the poor people in the United States, I mean, poverty level, they still have a television and a car, or I mean, there certainly are people who have far less than that. But generally speaking, our standard is so much higher than what we see in the rest of the world.
Well, living back in where probably we were in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they probably, for the most part, now where we were last, and they did not have roads until 1970. Now they're still building roads, but it takes hours to go. It will take 4 hours to go 40 miles, in a sense. The roads are very difficult, windy, dirt, for ruts and stones and so on and so forth. But the poverty is that they live in houses where the ground floor is their floor. They might have one light bulb.
So they have electricity.
They do have electricity. It's interesting enough, the government makes sure that they all have electricity. They do have electricity. But that's about all. They have water is a very difficult thing. They do not have plumbing as we have it for the most part in many, many places. and so plumbing and water is very difficult.
That again, it's just so hard to really imagine what the lifestyle is like, because
that's why I think so. I always say everyone should experience a third world country, if it would be Africa or wherever it may be. But we have, you can talk about, you can even see pictures, but we really don't understand what it means to live, to eke out an existence from the land, and with no work and no possibility of work. And they get $1 or $2 a day at the most for their work and for their labor. And that's why they want to come to this country. It's
well, are they such poor farmers that they can't grow the food that they need? Is there such a lack of water that it's not available?
Lack of water is one thing. Lack of machinery. They can't afford to buy the machinery, like tractors and so on, by hand. Most of it's by hand in the poor areas, and in the rural areas, in the compost area.
What are you saying, compost?
Campo, C-A-M-P-O.
Campo
it means
like,
rural,
okay.
Or camp, rural,
So how many cities are there? Are there many big cities in Mexico, or is it just this one?
Well, there are several. There are three large cities: Mexico City, Puebla, and Guadalajara. Very, very large cities. But then Mexico is filled with smaller towns and villages. The village where we stayed was about 2 hours from the town of Jalapa. We stayed in a village called Talixquilla. It was about 2 hours, not because of great distance, but because of difficulty of travel and the roads. In Jalapa, which is the larger town in that area, they do have, I've seen dentists and clinics and so on, but we were told there is not an X-ray machine in that town. For get an X-ray, you have to travel 4 hours to find an X-ray.
So their medical care and that sort of thing would be also very, very scarce.
Yes.
So coming to the United States, and I want you to talk more about what the people are like personally when we come back about this. But we were just saying a little while ago how it's just not in man's nature to pick up and leave his family, leave everything he knows.
They prefer not to.
Just like you have had a hard time leaving Hanover, Pennsylvania, born and bred, and then come back and work.
They really prefer not to leave, and they want to go back. Many of them want to go back, but they just can't. There's no work. There's no income. For survival, they have
your family, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your aunts and uncles are all there, and then I have visions of these men and boys and people running across the desert in the middle of the night and being picked up or arrested or just let go. Well, when we come back, I'm going to take a little bit of a break here, but when we come back, you can talk to us about the people themselves and how you find them as a people. Okay.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here, though. Thank you so much. Welcome back. You're watching Uprisings. I'm Muriel Krabs, and I am here with Father Joseph Gotwald, the pastor of St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Hanover. Is that right? Are you a pastor?
Yes,
is that what you call it?
Correct. Sure.
Okay. Anyhow, we're talking about Father Gotwald's experiences in Mexico. He has gone down there to become immersed in the culture so that he is better able to understand and to actually be a good shepherd to his Hispanic flock in Hanover. And I imagine, have you been asked to go anyplace else and talk about your experiences in other areas?
No, not really. No, that was the first time.
So you were telling us that you have been to some very, very poor places. What were the people like there? Could you
well, I'm happy to explain the people to you. And I just need to preface it by saying most of my experience has been with the people of Mexico. And although I've experienced people from Peru, and in our parish, about 90% of people are from Mexico, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to go to Mexico rather than another country, because Peru has a great deal of poverty also, and certainly Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua have very, very poor areas. But I chose Mexico because that's where most of our people are from. But we do have people from Peru, from Colombia, and El Salvador. As a matter of fact, my teacher is from El Salvador. So I've experienced different cultures in different countries. But I find the people from Mexico are really very, very different from most of the other people, I think, in the Central American, Latin countries. I find them very humble, docile, gentle people. And I think that comes from their history, too. They were, from the very beginning, the indigenous people. And where I spent a lot of time in the mountains, they are mostly indigenous people. Some don't even speak Spanish. They are indigenous people, and they've been there for years. And there are millions. There are like 5 or 6 million people.
What language do they speak?
Nahuatl is one. They have about 60 more dialects, but I went to where Nahuatl is the name of it.
So I think, just to sort of be clear about this, I think I understand this much, that Mexicans are of a Native American or Native Mexican background and a Spanish background. And that's where we get this Hispanic, that word almost comes from that.
That's correct,
that concept.
Yeah. So, but a lot of them there was a mixture of, from Spain, but also the indigenous people of Mexico, and there are many people there. But they have been subjected, they've always been a docile, peace-loving, calm people. But then if you read the history, when the Aztecs came in, and they are a very warrior kind of nation and so on, they're fighting, and then the Spanish
and the conquistadors.
The Spanish then got the Mexicans to fight against the Aztecs, and then they subjugated them. That the point is, you go to a town, and people who were born and raised there centuries ago had to then buy their land back from the Spanish. So they've been a very subjected kind of people, but I find them very gentle, soft-spoken people, very, very wonderful people. Also, I find that they are very, very grateful, very joyful people. They are very family-oriented. I think that's one of the great gifts, one of the blessings, the richness that they bring to our country. They really are very, very family-oriented. Now, you can figure that out, why that may be. And I was thinking, as part of it, is that, now, for example, where I spent most of my time, there are no malls.
Right.
There are no YMCAs. There are no athletic clubs. They have no movies, no movie theaters that I could see anywhere. So all they have are themselves, and so they love to come together as family, to sing, to dance, and to eat. They share their food. When you talk about soup kitchen, I'm getting a little off subject, but a soup kitchen here is where we go and bring food and make it. Maybe it might be at Hack, at the Hanover Council of Churches, and then the poor people come in. We feed them. No, there, the soup kitchens, they bring what they have, and then they share what they have with one another. And so, for example, there are no nursing homes.
Right.
And that sort of thing. And so they're very, very family oriented.
I have to just interrupt because one of the issues that I see coming, I mean, I'm concerned about our country and about the finances, and I think we're going to be headed to an area. That is one of the reasons that I'm doing this show, is again to remind people that there are things that are at our fingertips that are a source of joy.
Oh, yeah.
And hope. I mean, I was talking to my secretary today. Her family is very close. She spends time with her in-laws. She spends a lot of time with her grandmother-in-law, and they just have the greatest time with this older woman. We have, because of our society and because of our wealth and affluence, have been able to institutionalize grandma and institutionalize the toddler. And I do a lot of divorce work, and a gentleman came in to me the other day who has lost his job and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
paying child support.
Right.
And his concern, one of the things he was complaining about is, well, I never get to see her anyway, talking about his daughter, because I was working all the time. And I said, well, now you're not working all the time. Maybe you'll be able to see her more and have a better relationship with her. This is, and I think we were talking about this as well, sometimes all of the wealth gets in the way of the real joy.
Right. They live very simply. They don't, in a sense, I guess we'd say they don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they receive something, they're very grateful, very, very grateful. And they live very simply and they share what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did say to you, referring to is, I often think the more we have, the less satisfied we are.
That's right.
And the less we have, the more grateful we are for what we do have. So I find them just a very... it's amazing. They always seem to be, if you will, laughing and just very, very joyful people. And because they live so simply, I think that's what attracts me to. They don't need much. If I can, when we stayed in the homes this past time, where we were helping to build the houses, we had no hot water the entire time. And they did the dishes and the laundry outside. We're outside, and we got the water from the creek and so on. And I can't figure this out why, but they did have an indoor toilet, but there are no toilet seats. Now I can't figure out why, if you get a toilet, why you can get a toilet seat. But I guess that's a luxury, because many places. The other time, 2 or 3 years ago, we stayed in Talapa. We stayed in a place, and it was the same thing. And of course, the sewer, we talked about water and sewer and so on. So if you use the toilet, you can't throw the paper down. You have to put it in a basket beside you. And all that sort of. So they live very simply, and that doesn't bother them. They're very grateful for what they do have. And I guess their joy and their simplicity is what attracts me, and their gentleness, really. I just find them very, very gentle people.
Have you found
people.
those same characteristics in those people now who are in your parish with whom you interact?
Oh yes. Well, yes. I guess I'm thinking about. It sounds like qualification. It certainly is true with all the adults. Now the children are a different thing, different story. The children are all going to school, and
they've become Americanized.
And very quickly. In fact, I'm surprised how little English some of them, Spanish, some of them know. The children, they're going to like Hanover Street School and so on, Hanover High and so on. And if you look at them and I think probably the chagrin of their parents, but they really taken on the culture. The teenagers and the children have taken on the culture very, very rapidly. So they wear the chains and the baggy pants and all that sort of stuff. We don't see that so much.
Well, it's to be, understood. Well, they say that even with the Asians who've come here, and the
true.
English and the French, however they get here, the kids sort of.
But also the other thing is they're very, very conscious of their culture. And I don't know if I can articulate that clear enough, but their culture, and we've tried to develop that in our parish. We have in our parish, unlike any other parish in our diocese, which is like 15 counties, we have a Mexican dance group, and they really are very, very authentic, and they're wonderful dance group. But if you go to Mexico, you see that the costumes and the dancing, the customs are so very, very important to them. They maintain that. And there's a struggle, I think, trying to maintain some of that. And I think that's where they're criticized too, in Cinco de Mayo and so on. Some people get upset with all these big to-dos about these. But that's very important to them, their culture.
Well, it's no different than, I imagine, Hanukkah or any
St.
other
Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Everybody's Irish on
Right,
St.
that's what they say,
Patrick's Day.
right.
Yeah, so and I think I was mentioning to you earlier, someone suggested that the Catholic Church might be a little too encouraging of the Mexicans here, and I think your reaction was what?
Yeah, well, I really don't find that we encourage them. I think we try to be good citizens, and I think we try to say that they should not break the law, and that's why we do not encourage. But we certainly, number one, accept them. It might seem that we are encouraging them because we're very strong in human rights, And we know, for a fact, I know, and you go there, the human rights in Mexico for many, many people are just not present. And so we advocate for the human rights of people. And one of the things we do say is that a person has a human right to food, shelter, and also migration. We do say a person has a right to migrate.
For the betterment of their lives.
Absolutely, for the betterment of their lives.
We have only a couple of minutes, okay. So you have right now the ability to share with, I know we talked about your sermon being on hope. How does that fit in with, and Pentecost, how does it fit in with your connection and this immersion with the Mexican people?
Well, that's the very reason why they are willing to die, to cross the desert, to maybe die of thirst and starvation, dehydration, or be killed by some of the snakes. It's very, very dangerous crossing the country. And then also the trains that they ride to get into is very, very dangerous. But they come with a great sense of hope. They hope that they can find a better life, and also to send money back to so that their families can survive, with either the hope that someday they will return or someday that they can bring the people here. So hope really is very, very strong in the Mexican people.
And we are, as Christians, charged to have faith, hope, and charity. And I believe that we should be doing that towards our fellow man. And as the days go on and we get closer to each other and closer to some challenges, we'll remember those three.
Right.
And hope, of course, is part of what I feel. And, by the way, we are just almost out of time. So I can't thank you enough.
Okay.
And people can come to St. Joe's and to a Spanish Mass.
Everyone's welcome, and certainly whenever we have our dances, they'd be amazed.
Well, how can people find out about that?
Well, we advertise it in the stores. There are many Mexican stores. Most are Mexican.
Hey, we only have 2 seconds.
I
call you. Call me. Call St. Joseph's.
Well, I'm grateful because probably the biggest problem is fear. People, when they do not understand, they have fear. And so the more we can get to integration and to get to know one another, the less fear we'll have of one another.